I have been working for a long time making a router plane kit. I've put together a router plane because the cost was so prohibitive in buying an all metal version. The price just kept going up and up. So about 18 months ago, I came up with a prototype of this plane made out of a 2x4. And then I realized that not everybody wanted to get into metalworking. So I decided to put together a kit, and this is the kit. So we've got the information you need, a little package of screws, threads, and so on. We've got all the nuts and bolts that you need to make the router kit, so you can focus on just providing the wood for the router. And what I wanted to do was make it totally accessible to anybody, anywhere in the world. So we made a video about it. We made a how-to, we made 2 or 3 different videos, but this one is how to work from the kit. So I've put together the kit, so we've got a retainer bar, we've got adjustment knobs, and we've got cap screws and so on that all go together to make the whole kit. We even had a blade made specifically for us in Sheffield by a Sheffield toolmaker, and that's the blade, nice and substantial blade. That's what we need to get started. In this little package here, we've got the bolts, we've got machine screw on one end and screw on the other, and we've got all of the different specialist washers, we've got split washers and so on. So when we put this together, it comes together, and by the time you've made yours, it should look like this. It'll depend on the wood you're using, but this is really an amazing tool. I've been using this, solely this, for the past 18 months, and I think it's one of the best router planes that I have ever used. And it's nice, you've got wood on wood, everything about it really fits the hand. I've designed it specifically, and you can make your own from the kit, so you don't have to source the parts anymore. We got the price as low as we possibly could, even with the packaging, even with the different elements to it. We brought it together so we could ship it anywhere in the world, and that's what we've got. So this kit is for you. The video that we're in the middle of right now is going to take you step by step all the way through. But you could also download a PDF. We've got different ways that you can access this, because we want you to have your hands on something that will really transform your woodworking. This is an amazing tool, and I want you to be part of it. I want you to go on the journey with me. I started it 18 months ago. You're going to take it all the way through to the future. So if you want to buy the kit, just go to the description. That will take you all the way through to getting your own kit for your own router plane. So what we're going to do first of all, we're going to do a little bit of layout. I've got some oak. I decided to use oak because oak is very readily available. I've made them out of beech, and I know somebody who made one out of ash, and then other people have written in and said what they've made theirs from. So there's a variety of wood you could use. You want something that's fairly stable, fairly resistant, and so oak will do it for everybody. I'm not suggesting that you only use oak. Beech is really fine. It's a great plain wood because it's so stable. But I made this one before coming to put the film together, because I wanted to check out everything before I came to you with it. So here's my most recent one. I made that out of oak, and what we're going to do first of all is take the piece of oak that we've, or the piece of wood that we've got, you've got, and look at it and see which one you want. I'm looking at this and I'm saying this is I want for the front, so I'm just going to put a line on there. So, and I'm going to write front on here, and this is the way it's going to go in the hole. And this piece of wood is going to be what we call the upstand. It's not going to be as long as this. I left it this length so we could grip it in the vise without any problems. So we have a little bit of extra length that we'll be cutting down shortly. But the first thing is to find the center of the length of your piece of wood. Now your piece of wood should be 9.5. You may vary your sizes, so whatever it is, just find the center. So I've got 9.5, which makes that 4 3/4 to the center of that piece of wood, and that's what I've got. So I'm going to square a pencil line. Now I've worked meticulously on my piece of wood to make sure everything's square, so I can use any face as a reference for my square if I want to. I'm going to go down the back with this square line, and I'm going to go on the underside of my plane. So the registration face I'm using for my square is that back face. From that back face, I'm going to measure 2 inches. So I'm going to measure 2 inches for a crosshair. Now I'm going to put the pencil line on first, like that. But I'm now going to go with a knife because I want this to be so accurate. So I'm setting the distance at 2 inches. If you want to, you could set this, the combination square to the 2 inches, and that will give you a guaranteed stop when we turn over. So there's my 2-inch set. I'm taking my knife and I'm making a knife mark across. I flip over, use the same registration face, and make a mark on this side too. So that gives me the exactness that I want. Now I'm going to go with my square. Again, I'm going to go on the same back edge. I'm going to go on the registration, and I'm going to make a crosshair on the center mark, make a small nick on the back, stand up, small nick on the opposite corner, and that will guarantee me being dead square on the crosshairs and give me the crosshairs to set my point on when I drill a hole. I'm going to drill a fairly big sized hole. I've got a 32mm bit, just a paddle bit. I use this because I knew that that might be what you would be able to get hold of. So it's just under 1 1/4 inches. The size of the hole you can vary if you want to. You could go a little bit smaller. It's a good size. It seemed to work for me. On the crosshairs, I'm going to go with an awl. I want this to be dead on because I'm going to use this to put the point of the paddle bit into. Flip over onto the crosshairs again. Now I can see my pencil line was slightly off before. So I keep going into the hole because I can nudge it to get it centered on the crosshair if I do that. So now I'm going to put it in the vise this way because I can push hard against the board when I drill the hole. But what I've got to do is I've got to find some way. If I start drilling just with the bit like I was just going to, I have no guarantee that I'm following through square. So what I've done is I've made a guide. I just took a scrap of wood. Any piece of wood will do. And what I did is I took 2 separate pieces. So if I took this piece of wood, ripped it down the middle, and then I put the planed faces together, I could take the one piece, stand it up in the vise, square a line across. I'll show you on here just to give you an idea of where I'm going. Square a line across, and then take a 3mm bit, place it on that squared across line and put the 3mm bit and make a second parallel line to it. Then take your bit and put it on the edge and make a depth mark, but you could set a gauge to this. And then what you do is you saw down the insides of those 2 lines on the waste side of the wood with a saw, and then take a very fine chisel, if you've got one. If you don't have a fine chisel like I have here, just take an awl or something like that and slide it in between the kerfs, and that will pop out the bulk of the wood. Take this face then and put it against the other face, so you've got 2 planed up faces. Glue them together, clamp them in the vise, and then take a drill, the same 3mm drill, and drop it right into that hole, and it'll take out the glue and it'll clean out any residue. And when you've done that, you'll see that this is square. When you offer a square to that drill bit, like this, offer it this way, and you'll see that you're square, and that will give you a guide to drill the hole with. So you're going to see me use this. Now this hole then needs to be 8mm from this edge. So you'll plane this down to 8mm where it centers on the hole, and then we can use that to drill all the holes that we're going to be making, and that will guarantee that they're perpendicular to the surfaces we'll be drilling into. So you're going to see me use this guide now. I'm going to place it on here, but before I do, I'm going to load the drill bit, the 3/8 bit, into the drill. and drill a hole. What we do is we're going to drill a hole before we use the guide. We're going to go right into the hole that we started with the awl and just make a very small recess. That means we can drive this through the guide. I'm going to go a little bit longer with my bit. We drop it into the hole, make sure there's no debris, and then we press this down so the drill bit is in the hole it started, and then we're going to drill down and just let that drill flow. Now I'm going to go from both sides because I feel like I'll get greater accuracy. So I flip over and the two holes will come together. So start your hole just a hair, like that. Into the hole, down, and press it nice and firm against the surface and just let the drill float and it'll come through exactly the same place as the other hole. So now we've got that nice and square. We're going to drill a bigger hole through here with the 32mm bit. Now if this didn't line up perfectly, I don't know what else I could do. I don't have a drill press. I'm trying to help everybody who doesn't have a drill press not to go out and buy a drill press. So I'm going to start the hole. So I'm letting that point of the bit go into the hole. I'm just pushing forward. I'm not trying to steer it. Now I've gone about halfway through. You could, if you wanted to, you could take a scrap of wood, clamp it on the back and go all the way through. I prefer to go through from both faces. Again, I'm using that hole as my guide and it's helping me to get perpendicular hole through this piece of wood. Now it is quite a sizable bit, that through 32mm, but I've got a nice clean hole, and if there is any discrepancy, I can always go in with a small rasp if I want to and do a little bit of rasp work in here just to even up anything that may have gone a little awry. You could wrap a piece of sandpaper around a broom pole, broom handle, and rasp it out, file it out that way. So now I'm looking for my front. So this is the front of my piece, and now I've got to make another bit on here. I've got to make a guide that's going, an upstand, this one, that's going to make a recess into this. So the first thing I want to do is put a recess in this, and that recess is going to take this bit and it's going to offer the bit to the work. Once it's made into a router, that's what's going to cut it. So I'm using this registration face first. So I'm going to come in from the edge of my upstand 2.5 inches. I've got two rulers here. So come in from one end. It doesn't. This I've not cleaned up yet because I'm going to use a rasp and I'm going to shape it, and we'll be doing that too shortly. So squaring everything, holding everything nice and rigid. I've got that first line. So that's my first mark. Now watch what happens. I'm taking the actual router bit and I'm sliding it up to the side of the steel blade. That's going to give me the second knife wall. Gently with the first pass, nice and firm with the second. We're going to come on this face 9mm. We're going to go 9mm. This is a 10mm bit, blade. So we're going to come 9mm from that edge. Now we can set a marking gauge, but we don't have lines to work to yet, so let's do that. I'm setting a marking gauge to 9mm. And we can always adjust. We can always adjust whatever we're doing. We can keep tweaking and adjusting after the plane is made. So I'm putting these two lines on both sides just so that I can know where to start and stop my gauge. It won't particularly matter because it's a tool that we're making, but here we go, right in between, set the pin at the furthest away from you into the wood, and then glide this along the surface until it hits that dimple that we put in. Same on that one. So I've got a little dimple there, and as I push forward, it'll stop me going too far. So now I'm going to go with my knife again into that knife nick that's on the main face there. That's going to be the front of the upstand when we're done, and pull the knife up to your gauge line. And this just stops any splintering on the outer surfaces when we're done. So and it's a good guide. We can work exactly to that point. It's a wonderful tool to make a router plane. It's incredible. So I'm just going to make a little step down here, like that. Drop my saw into the step down. I think it's important to make sure the saw stays inside your knife wall in both planes. Now I need a smaller chisel. Now your 3/8 chisel might not fit. Mine does fit because we're working between metric and imperial here. So I'm just taking this down about half the distance, just gently tapping it because it's got no restraints on either side. It can split in a direction you don't want to. I'm going from both sides, so I'm going about halfway down, 4 or 5 millimeters down, and that'll take out the bulk of the waste. So I'm looking now for my gauge line. I'm not quite deep enough with my saw cut, because I cut from the other side. And if I go past the depth line, it's going to show when I've done, so I don't really want that. And that was getting me about 2 mil from my line. Now I'm in my gauge line, just to get that established. I'm just above my gauge line now, just to get that bulk of the waste out and down. Splinter in my wrist there. Into the gauge line directly. So I want this to be level so it maximizes the support on the blade, and I don't yet have a router to guarantee myself, do I? So let me just check myself, yeah. So in this case, I now have to use my chisel, the chisel itself, to get level across. So I just rock the chisel. I can see I still have a hump in the middle, and I don't mind that hump for now, but it will eventually need to be dead level. So I'm working from both sides to get it level. And I keep working on the rise. It's still a rise in the middle, so I'm being quite careful not to undercut. And I think that's pretty close. So let's see how this goes with the actual blade. So I'm too tight, but my blade will go in. So I'm going to go with a wide chisel and pare down this inside wall very carefully, because I want the whole of the wall, preferably, to be in contact with my chisel, with my blade, when it goes in. I'm close, I'm so close. So I'm going on the top on that knife wall and pare cutting down very carefully. You can see I'm pretty tight in there. I think it's still too tight. Still a little bit too tight. I'm going to bring my chisel up here. Just take off a thou. I think that's probably close enough. Remember, the blade is sharp, so there it is. It should go in. It does go in. So I can tap this in now to check my depth. I'm not going to leave it that tight. I'll go in and ease this later, but usually, because of the compression of the end grain fibers, it does end up loose. So there I am. Am I down? I check either side for any gaps. I've no gap on this side, a slight gap this side, which generally means I've got a little bit of a hump in the middle, but I'm going to leave that for now because I can finesse that later. Let's get rid of this dangerous edge here. I'm looking down into the top to see, yeah, I can see some fibers in this inside corner here that were holding it off right at the very bottom. I'm going to go back with my chisel. That's great. So we finished with that for now. What we're going to do now is check, because we now have to make an angle cut on this side here, and we're going to look at the. So I'm going to use my iPad. I'm sure you will have either a PDF, a drawing, or something you're going to work to. And what I'm going to do is set my protractor to 50 degrees. So I've set my protractor to 50 degrees. What I want to do is put this in the vise. This is the front face with the recess in. So I'm going to place the protractor against the front edge, and I'm going to use that front edge as the registration face and make a line across from the bottom corner. You'll see it now if I show you. So I've gone from the bottom front corner to the top. What that's going to do is give me the slope. It's going to give me the presentation so that when this sits onto here like this, it's going to give me the slope on the front that's going to be the bed angle for the cutting iron. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my finger, but you can use a gauge if you want to, or you can use a setting. You can set your combination square, but I normally would just go with my finger down here like this, and then that will give me the line for me to run the saw to. So I'm going to go down here. I may as well give myself a depth to go to, because I'm coming 2.5 inches on this side of the recess. So I'm going to have 2.5 inches on this side, 2.5 inches on the other side. That will give me a depth to cut to. And now you'll see why it made sense to have the extra length, so I could put it in the vise. And I'm going to cut down on the waist side of this. Let me put this out of the way with a saw. Now I just happen to have a very nice small saw, but any panel saw will work. Cut on the waist side of the line, because you need to plane this surface when it's done. So I'm leaving a little bit of wood in there. Once you've got the angle, start dropping your hand and following the line that you just made. I want to stay on the front corner here, if I can, or near to it anyway. So I start dropping my hand like this. So it's using the original start of the saw kerf to guide the angle. When I've done that, I lift up. I want to check myself to make sure I'm not coming into this corner or twisting the saw. Keep checking yourself. I'm moving away from it, if anything, so I'm happy with that. Check, check, check. Now I moved quite away from my line. I could feel myself drifting, but I'd rather have something to plane off than cut into the face. That's my cut line. I'm going to cut this off. This is going to sit right on the center of here like this. So I'm going to plane this down until I've gone down to this keen front edge, a sharp front edge. How I'm going to do that is put it in the vise. I'm going to put it in this way because I have the strength of the long grain to work with. I'm going to go this way. I think this might be with the grain. So just above the vise, maybe a little bit, 3/16 of an inch or something like that. Now, of course, you've weakened the length of this because you put the recess in, so don't over clamp it. Good sharp plane. I'm looking for the front edge, following the front edge at the moment, but then I'm going to follow the back edge, this where you have the line on your side. Now I'm playing against the grain, but my plane is sharp. What I want to do is make sure that I'm planing accurately. There's my front edge. Checking myself. I can't get much better than that. Let me go with the grain now to get the clean cut that I'm looking for. So I still have a very slight flat all the way along the front edge. Now I must say that if you were 51 degrees or 50.5 degrees, it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference. I'm measuring here again just to check that I'm parallel, because that will govern what I have at the other end when I come to fit this to the surface. Just over 1 5/8, just over 1 5/8. So let's see how this seats onto the piece of wood itself. This is my back edge, this is the front, there's my center line. I want a center line in the bottom of the recess or somewhere. So what I'm going to do is eyeball the center. I don't think I could get more accurate than eyeballing it. I'm going to mark the length like this, and like this. That's going to be my overall length. But now I want to come back because the bottom of this recess is 1 inch from the back edge of my piece of wood. This ruler is 1 inch. So I'm going to flush it on the back edge and make a line across like that. And then I'm going to bring the piece of wood to that line. That's going to be the position of my upstand when I'm finished. So now I'm going to leave that just as it is. I'm going to put a pencil line, but I'm going to measure from the front edge of my piece of wood just to get the identical measurement from side to side, because that will give me the parallelity that I want. Let me go. I'll come back just a hair on this side. And that will give me exactly the distance. This is just for parallelity. I'm still using that 1 inch mark inside that recess. Make a mark across the front edge, and you're going to use these as reference faces very shortly. So what we're going to do next, oops, is not drop the upstand on the floor. We're just going to take a couple of very small nails. I'm using 1/2 inch pins here. I'm going to drive those into the surface. Now I'm going to go near towards the back corner. So I'm about 1/2 inch from the back edge, about 1/2 inch from the outside edge, and drive these 2 pins in just like this. I know that these are out of the way of any metal that I'm going to add when I put the bolts in and things like that, so I won't be drilling into the steel. Take your pliers and lay them on the surface, and that will give you a protrusion of the metal. Now watch you don't pinch yourself with the pliers and things like that. You just have to be careful. This is protruding a bit too much, so just to drive them a little bit deeper. Now you've got your pencil lines either side, but I suggest you also sight down the middle of your channel against your center line to see how you feel. And we're going to drop the hammer on the top here like this and like this. Now when we're done, this protrusion will be planed off and it'll be planed flush. We'll also plane a flat on the top so that we can, so that when our hands touch it, we don't have any sharp corners. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do a little bit of shaping on here because we can't do it after that's done. So we're going to take a tin like this and flush it. This is just a tomato tin, and I think we give the size of the diameter of this. I'm going to draw a line here. I'm going to go onto this face and do the same. So flush at the back edge and flush at the top. And that's going to be the shape we want for the final shaping of the end of the upstand. Just like that. Now you've got oil on your thumb if you're like me, because this is my can of oil, my rag in a can oiler. Okay, the next thing we've got to do is we want to shape this as well. We can do that now. We put this in the vise like that, and then 1/2 inch. So this is the front edge, this is the back edge. 1/2 inch from the front edge we make a mark. 1/2 inch from the front edge on the other end we make a mark. And this is important. We had it square because we could clamp it in the vise and everything. Now we can bend the steel rule to that 1/2 inch mark and make a radius, and then go to the other side and do the same. So I'm pushing it hard against the vise jaw on the back or the front and making that line. So now you can see I've got this nice even curve along there. Now I probably shouldn't have put those nails in just yet, but they won't make any difference. They're not protruding more than a very small amount. So a few stop cuts along this fore edge. Make sure you try to keep your saw as level as possible. And don't dip and dive, because you'll have to plane that out, and that can lead to unevenness when you finally swipe it with the plane, and you will end up deeper on one side than the other. So 1-inch chisel, securing the vise, and then start chopping. So I'm laying my chisel onto the surface. My chisel's not quite wide enough to go across the hole. So I'll go to there, and then I'll come in on this side and do that one little tiny narrow band there. So I'm watching for the grain, looking for the direction, like then it just split without me expecting it. And we're doing quite well. Can you see it nosedived a little bit on that side? If you can't, I'm telling you that it did ever so slightly. I don't believe it's at all going to affect anything. But with oak, you don't have the positivity sometimes that you feel with other woods. It does tend to be a little bit wiry. Okay, so I need to go quite a bit deeper, another 1/8 here. I'm being cautious because I don't want it to split wrongly. So I've got the rough shape. I'm pretty close. I do the same on the opposite side. So laying the chisel flat on the surface and then guiding it, whoops, towards the line, like that. Take off the excess width. Now it's an aesthetic thing, really. This you could keep it square, but it just looks so nice when you've done. Plain. Where are you? So now we're going to. So I'm feeling for the arc with my plane, and I'm watching for squareness as I do. I've got a beautiful crisp edge, but is it square? So that's the next thing. I want to offer my square somewhere on here, no matter which face. So I'm slightly out. I've got a little bit more to take on that side. This is fun. This is really wonderful. I think that gets that. I've got rid of all the saw kerf, which is what I want. Notice that I'm going from high to low. I can't plane up this way because it's against the grain. I'm going into the end grain that way. So start on the top and work down. So I'm looking for any saw kerf in that fore edge. I'm looking for the pencil line on this side now. Ah, I love this. I'm not far off, just a hair on your side to come off. Check myself, checking. You could use a spoke shave for this too, if you want to, a flat bottomed one. So that's that done. Now what we're going to do is we're looking for a 3/4 inch washer. I've got one here. And this gives me, again, we're looking for a level of accuracy. This just gives me a radius that will be half that. So I've got a 3/8 radius. Use the washer, it works perfectly. Do each corner just like that. Do the back corners too. That means you don't have any sharp corners to catch when you're using your router plane. Once you've got that, watch what happens here. This goes very quickly. I've planed up my ends. My end grain is already smooth. So I'm going to go with a rasp and knock the corner off at 45. And I look at this edge for squareness, and then I'm looking here for when I hit the radius, the arc, and then here, that's what happens. So I'm going quite gently. This is a Shinto rasp, and it does remove material very quickly. I go from there to a flat file, just a 10-inch flat file, and using this eliminates any need for sanding. So I've got a perfectly smooth radius going into that end grain. I do the same on all four corners. It's very fast, very efficient. Now I've got a radius on that front edge from the plane, so I can almost lay it right on the front. Watch this, and move it forward gently. I'm just letting the weight of the rasp, not any force, to get that radius as perfectly as I can. I'm going into the flat face. It's just absolutely smooth as silk. It looks almost like a machine made it. Down to that mark. Gently with this, I can't stress enough that we're just using the weight of our rasp and just the weight of our hands, really. We're almost holding the rasp back from cutting too deep. Watch that front edge. If you see yourself going out of square, correct it. Down onto the flat face. Try and get a continuous sweep down onto that front face. I'm looking good all the way around, I think. So what we're going to do, just very quickly, we're going to just take the file and knock the corners off. Not very much. This will just make it comfortable when you're using it. I won't do the back edge because that's where, well, that's the underside. So I can do the underside of the back edge. On the top edge I can't because I want to bring the upstand tight up to that corner. Round the corner on that nose, round that one, just a little bit. One last thing we have to do now is shape the upstand. This is very fast. You just take this, put it in the vise, take your rasp. I've got the coarse side down, and I'm taking off the bulk of the waste, and I'm looking at the radius on both faces, on both planes. I'm going to go all the way until I hit it at this angle, so it's almost a 45, until I hit the radius, the arc, on both sides. Let me just take a second to show you what I've got. I've got the radius this side, the radius this side. That's probably as close as I will go for now. Still with the coarse side, but not aggressively. No, not aggressively. Go gently. And now this, a little bit awkward because the vise gets in the way a little bit. Now I'm going to flip over and work from this side. I'm going to come all the way up until I hit the bottom corner barely. Go with the file and trim it out with the file. I'm going to go here because I can't quite get this corner. So I'm going with the gentle side of the rasp, and then with the file. And I can still do more on most of that. Where I can't get it, this bottom edge. So I want to make sure that that's dealt with just like that. I can still work the top edge. I've got this one end to do, and then we'll be ready to glue this into place. Coarse side again. Down to the lines, down to the arc. Just kiss the top of the arc on both sides. If you take the coarse onto this corner, it'll fracture that corner. So don't go onto it, go close to it. Flip over to the finer side. You can go here. I love the way this looks. It's such a simple step, and it looks so very nice. Back in the vise, just to clean up with the flat file onto that top edge. I've just got rid of my pencil line from when I marked it onto the top surface of the base pleat, the sole, as it were. As I said, I can still get some of this now, but what we want to do is we want to put this onto the 2 pins. So I'm feeling for those 2 pins. We don't need to cut this inner just yet to get the depth. I'm going to go with PVA glue. It's a fine glue. It works well for this. Not too much glue. You don't need very much. You don't want too much glue oozing out. But you do want to make sure you did get all the surface coated. I think I might, yeah, that's good, I believe. I definitely want glue on this edge here, so I'm just going to run a bead here and here, because that edge is quite thin, and not the back edge so much, because we'll be planing that off. Great, so that's where I am. I've got the 2 pins protruding. I'm still eyeballing for center. Make sure you've got no glue on your hands. And now all we're going to do now is put this in the vise like this. That top edge we're going to be planing, so we should not have any problem. I'm looking along the edge now, making sure it seats and it looks perfectly seated. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want. Now we've got to this bit, I've got to plane the back off or trim the back off. I think you could either do the bulk of it with a chisel. I'll show you this bit, and whichever size chisel you want. I'm just going to go with a 1 inch. I'm checking for the grain direction, and it's shooting up. So if in doubt, just go with a plane. So I'm just taking the bulk off, so I'll save a little bit of planing. Good sharp chisel. And then my plane. So I'm resting on the main back of the sole and just leaning the cutting edge into the back of the upstand. And that's my clearance stroke there, so I've got that. What about the front edge? What you might want to do is just take a scraper and just scrape any areas now, like this, just to get any plane marks out. A file maybe to the edge, like this. Just get rid of the hard corners. You're going to be working with this. I've got a little bit of glue in there to squeeze, that squeezed out, so I'm going to take a chisel to that. So I come in flat right into the corner, come down from the vertical And basically PVA is really a plastic, so it comes off as a plastic remnant. Got none at the front edge. I've got a pencil line in there which will probably bother me if I don't scrape it out. So I'd just go right along the front edge like that, and then erase the others or scrape them if you want to. I think I like, where is my other scraper? There it is. So just scraping out the marks. I think I'm done with those squared across marks. So we've got a couple of things to do here. I've flushed the back and I want to take the top ridge off because I think it looks nicer. But sometimes I take that off before when I'm shaping the upstand. I'm going to just go with a couple of strokes. I'm going against the grain just to give it a flat top. Try and get it as even as you can. That will make it look very nice. And then you can file into it just to take off the hard corner. So this is preferential. This is purely cosmetic. It's got nothing to do with the functionality of the plane. So there is my basic plane. On the underside here, this is the front edge. And sometimes when we offer the blade in here, it gets a little near to this front edge. And I think it's much better to put some measure of relief on the underside at that front edge. So right on your center line, just make a nip with your chisel and then feather in with the bevel down into that area. So I'm leaning on the bevel all the way through. Same on this area here on the opposite side until they meet in the middle. Now you can take sandpaper if you need to, but I'm just going to get it straight off my chisel and leave it there. I'm going to take a little bit off the back here just because it's fractious, that edge. So it's not just a little tiny bevel really, just to strengthen that back edge. And now there's nothing to grab. You can take sandpaper on your finger, sand the inside of the hole if you want to, but we'll leave that for now. The next thing we've got to do is deepen that foredge and take off. There are a couple of corners of the upstand that just barely come into the opening there. So I'm just taking the bevel of my chisel against the wall, the wall of the hole, just taking off that internal corner. And now we're going to take the chisel hammer. I'm going to offer my chisel right up against the main wall of the recess on the upstand and then just tap. Same on this side. I'm going to go with a smaller chisel, 3/8 that goes in between hopefully. Just take it down incrementally. We're going to use the very bottom of the recess as our guide. When we get near to the bottom, we want it on a level with the upstand recess, because that's going to support the bevel of the or the back of the plane cutting iron. We keep going. Now you can saw down this as well. I'll show you that. So you put your saw right into the corner and just rub the saw down, being very careful not to go too deep. You don't want to go too deep. So go on the top edge. Don't take a lot off because that tends to break, especially on oak. Oak is very brittle. We go down, down, down like this. Trying to follow the same angle as the upper part of that bed. So now my chisel is tight up against, just rocking it from side to side. And I think we're good. That it might need some paring. a little bit somewhere. I can feel it. A little resistance. Let's go on the wall itself, like this. So I'm paring just a little bit. I don't want to take too much off. I really don't want this to be loose in there. But if it's tight, it won't slide as well as I would like it to. That looks perfect, I think. Yeah, I'm still high at that leading edge. There's my chisel. So I'm going on the incline. Just rocking the chisel from side to side. Yeah, I was just a little bit proud with the wood. I'm looking on each side. Let me have a look underneath now. Make sure there's no gap on the underside. Right in there is where I'm looking, and I still feel a need to pair cut a little bit. Take a straight edge if you've got one. Offer it to the work to see if you have a hollow, and I do have a hollow. These little things, you can get this done the majority of the way and then go back in when you've got everything together. What's telling the story is looking at the side, the profile at the side, and looking down the side of the blade, and now it looks parallel with this surface. So I feel content now that everything has gone according to plan. And I've got a well-supported cutting iron deep in the bottom of my recess. So that's great. So the next thing we're going to do, I'll put it this way so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to take the cutting iron and lay it on its side and make a pencil line on the top of the cutting iron. It doesn't matter where it starts and stops, but right down into the corner and make a pencil line on each side. And then we're going to go, from each side, we're going to go 1 3/8 from each side of the hole of the recess. Now you can check this with your, let's see which is the best way. You can check this with your retainer bar in a minute, which is what I'm going to do. So I've got 2 crosshairs there. Where's my retainer bar? There it is. So when I put this on, I'm looking for the crosshairs inside the 2 holes. And yeah, I think I'm good to go. So we take the awl right on the crosshairs. And I'm going to check myself again. I can see they're on center. One side is a little higher than I wanted it. Now we're going to take the 3mm bit. And now you'll see why I wanted this hole to be that distance from the bottom, because I want it to be clear. If I go that way, I won't be able to reach it. So let's lock this in the bit in the drill. Now, one thing we've got to be careful of is that this drill isn't so long that it goes all the way through and comes out the back of the plane. So let's go with just a gentle start on those 2 holes. Just very, very shallow, a 1/16, no more. Drop this on through the hole. Let's clear off the debris off the top of there. And then seat the guide and just let the bit go. Once you've gone in so far, the hole itself will do any further drilling if it needs to. So this will help keep it square to the stand, perpendicular to that front edge. Now I want to know how deep I'm going. So I want to pretty much take as much of this shank as I can. So I've got to drill a deeper hole yet. So what I want to do is mark my drill bit. So I'm going to go somewhere around there. So this is just to make sure I don't go too deep. Going into the hole, let it guide itself, follow its rake. Don't let it go past the line. That's that bit. Now we've got to go with a bigger bit. So this has got to take the main shank of the screw. Now that's too big. I want it to bite into the walls. Let's go with a 5.5 mil. Take a look at that. That's just a little bit too tight. This is a 5 mil. And now that's taking the main body of the screw, but it's leaving the threads to bite into the wall. Whoops. Now we can do the same again on this bit if we want to. The problem is we could end up with so many marks on here, we're not sure which one is which. So I'm going to put a mark on just to make sure I don't come out the back. And I'm going to drill this. I'm going to let the drill float, take its own passage in, because it will follow the path of least resistance. I'm going to go down to near to that mark, or maybe a fraction above it, but certainly not past it. Take the bit out. Now we're going to load this into the drill itself. And I'm looking at the thread. I've got the machine thread and I've got the screw thread on there. What I'm going to do is put a little bit of furniture paste on the very tip. This will help to ease it in and reduce the risk of splitting. Things can go wrong. So I've got the wax on there. Let me just chisel off that fuzzy edge a little bit. And we've got 5 of these to do, I believe. So I'm going down close to the end of the machine thread, and I've got that one in. So I cinch this tight on here. See this? I wait for the click. I know it's not going to move now because I don't want to wear the threads out as it goes in. Not too much torque on it. That's that bit done. Now let's see how we did. Yeah, it's pretty close. I'm a little bit, let's see. That's all it needed, just that little bit. So that's ready for loading. Did I come out the back? No, I didn't come out of the back. So I've got the back one to do now. Now this one is following the rake of the recess. It's going to go parallel to the recess. So I want this one also to be exactly where I need it. This is the wonderful thing about my guide, is it works so well. So I'm going to measure down, show you what I'm going to do. I want to measure from the bottom of the recess is 5/16. That's the center of the center of the hole that you're going to drill. And that is absolutely centered on the recess. So I'm happy that I can eyeball that, and so can you, but you can still check your measurements when you're done just to make sure. So I'm going to bring the lines down the side, and then I'm going to check my measurement to see if I am centered. I'm very close. So I'm about a fraction out, so I'm going to use the point of my awl to nudge it over a 32nd at the most. That's that bit done. Back to my 3/8 bit. You can see all the time what we're relying on here. So just nudge it in until it just bites, and I did nudge that the wrong way. I said 3/8 instead of 3 mil, so that's a 3 mil bit, sorry. So go through the hole, center it right into that recess. Make sure the block is absolutely solid on the surface. Keep it pressed. Now, how deep did I go? I still got the mark on from that 1 inch, which will be close enough to the length of the thread that I'm putting in there. So this is another one that's important, because this one needs to be parallel to the bottom of the recess, because it will steer the blade going down into it. So here we go again. Uh-oh, what did I forget? I got to drill a bigger hole. Don't do that, because it will split it. I was just testing you. So it does follow, it definitely follows the rake of the hole, which is exactly what we wanted. I'm just going to pare off the surface fibres there, just to get them out of the way. A little bit of wax. Just go until the screw thread disappears. Now we're good for many things here. So we've got this done, we've got the underside done. We can start loading everything in. Here's my blade, so this goes in a minute. But first of all, we've got to put some of the other little pieces on. We've got this, this, and this. Now we can go ahead and load these, because I know we have more work to do. Aha. There we go. So it's sliding nicely. Let's put the bar on. So it's got, on the bar you'll see that it's nearer to the bottom than it is to the top. It's the narrow one that goes to the bottom. Then we're going to put a flat washer on each side. And then we're going to put the split washer. And that's going to be our compression spring, so that when we tighten this, we can have maximized the adjustability. What did I just do? We maximize the adjustability of the pressure we apply when we cinch these two knurled nuts down. Got wax on my fingers now. So that's that bit done. This one goes on just on its own. And it can go either way up. It can go the opposite way in if you need to get deeper down for a deeper recess. It's all part of the design. So there we have it. There you have your plane. You've got the spring compression on those. You've got a slight gap between the wood of the forepart and the underside of your retainer bar. And that gives you the, so you can actually, once we tweak, we're going to do some more tweaking on this, but this will adjust it, and it's working perfectly well. So I'm pretty close, but I still have a little bit of tweaking, which will just be filing or sanding or something like that. So now we're going to move on to the handles, and the handles, I know the handles come 2 inches from the back edge, and they come 1 inch in, no, 7/8 inch from the outer edge. Let's go here. Two inches from the back edge, top corner. Same on this side. Crosshairs, poked with the awl just to get that start. 3/8 bit. And it's a good idea to make sure that the bit isn't in too far. So we're going to take the guide here, pass it through, and then we can make a micro adjustment on the depth to make sure it's not coming through. But we are going to go almost to about 3 or 4 mil from the underside, I think. I'll secure this here. Start the holes just a Now this is where we start to consider, long one, I think this is the one. You have to get these sides just right, because if it's too small then it can split the oak, especially oak. Oak tends to split more readily. So I want to make sure when I come to this bit that I don't go too deep, because now we're working with some quite tight tolerances. What we've got is the handle, we've got the flange on the nut that goes on the top. We've got to consider all of this. But the most important thing really is that we don't go too deeply. And let me show you on this what I'm looking for. I want the point of this screw to be at least 4 millimeters from the underside of the edge. So that puts my mark right there. I can take that mark and mark it directly onto my drill, and that will give me the depth that I want to go to in the hole. It's absolutely imperative, this, because if you get too near to the underside, you can come through or bubble up on that underside. So that's my guide right down in the recess. Now that's ready to go, but I've got another thing that I want to bring into play here. It's very difficult because I don't know what size doorknob that you're going to be using for anchoring this into the base here. So what I want to do is add the different components together. So there's my screw cap going on there. By calculation, I can then work out how this is going to relate to the actual base, and here is the knob that's going to go here. So I'm pretty tight. I need to reduce this bolt because of the size of the knob. Your knobs may be higher, and if they are taller, then you won't have this problem. I need to take some off here because inside this cavity, the steel goes down inside the screw thread, and that will stop it. So that will bring it to seat too early. So what we're going to do is we're going to take off some metal off the machine screw side, but we can take it off the pointed side if we want to. So we're just going to go with a hacksaw and take about 4 threads off here for me. I don't know what it will be for you, if it's anything at all. But there's plenty of thread inside the barrel. Remember that that steel will be hot where I just picked it up. Put it in the vise, take your file, and just take off the burr, file the top, take off the burr, and then just come round the corner just to remove any hard corners from there. Take your screw, your nut, and guide it on, because it will lose the easing in that you get from the machine when they make these threads. So when we come to drill the holes in here next, we're ready to put this into the wood. If I position this, I can now see I've got plenty. I've got 4 millimeters shy of the very top of my bolt, so I can put these in as long as I do the other one exactly the same. So this one can now go into the hole. The other one has yet to be cut. So we'll go ahead and do this one. Now, how deep? I've got a mark on the screw. I can just see. So I'm going to check on the underside. You might feel it dimple on that underside. Hopefully you won't. Now we've got to make sure we're not backing the screw out. So I'm taking the clutch of the drill driver. When this goes back on here, we're ready to see this. So you can see I've got the screw thread above the wood, but it doesn't matter. I still have plenty of wood, plenty of threads engaged on there, and that's going to work out pretty near perfect, but I can still go down another 2 or 3 turns on the thread without worrying that I'm going to come through the bottom. So now what we've got to do is we've got to work on the handles. We've got to reduce these. We're going to reshape them. We're going to reduce this bottom part. If you like that bottom part, it's fine, leave it on. But I found that it just gets in the way. So I've reduced them by taking off the outside of the stem, and this works perfectly on my thumbs every time. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to show you how we reshape these, how we bore the holes to fit onto the plane, and that's going to be not a big deal. It's enjoyable to do, and I think you'll enjoy it too. Using shelf line around the rim of the knob is really good for grip inside the holder. Here I'm just using my finger as a guide and just guesstimating the edge. I did measure it, so I'll just use my finger and that will give me the line to work to. It's much quicker to saw off the excess, create an octagon or whatever, however many sides we get, but I just saw right up against the line and then put the rasp, the Shinto rasp on its side and then follow the lines. It's really quite simple. So here I'm kind of undercutting, beveling into the underside. So I'm kind of trying to line up nearer to the cove that's on the inside, on the underside of the knob there. I put it in the vise on the side so it overhangs the end, so I can actually take almost a full quarter stroke to get the round that I need. I put the screw into the end of the doorknob and then chuck it in the clutch of the drill driver and turn it and sand it, and it works really well for this kind of a project. It's quicker if you use a lathe and probably much easier if you have a lathe, but most of you will not have a lathe, so I'm doing it the way I think most of you will be doing yours. See how it's overhanging the end of the vise, so I can go with that sweeping stroke with the Shinto rasp. I'm measuring for the center, then I turn them 90 degrees and measure for the center again. just by eyeballing down to the edge and then finding the middle by measuring half the distance. So if it's 40 millimeters across, it'll be 20 millimeters to the center. This is my step. These are my steps. So I have step cuts in here. So I'm drilling the step just to take the rim of the barrel. So I drill down to take the rim of the bolt head that's going to go in there, the set screw, and then I drill a 9 millimeter hole, and that takes the main barrel of the screw. And now I'm drilling through from the underside to connect up to the middle of the top cut, the top hole. So I'm going through from both sides, and that will center the hole into the main body of the knob. What I'm doing here is I'm giving a slight leading edge into the recess of the blade so that it doesn't catch harshly on the edge of the adjuster bolts, or adjuster nuts, I should say. A little bit of abrasive paper will soften all the edges. And that means when we actually load this into the router plane, it won't grate on the edges, on the corners. Last step really is to sharpen the blade. And there's not very much to do to this because the blade already comes pretty near sharpness, but we just want to hone that edge on a fine stone. So I've honed it on a fine stone, and now I've gone to the strop just to polish the bevel, and I've used the plywood side of the strop to do the flat face, because I don't need the leather side. And here is the router plane in action. It's working beautifully. I'm cleaning up the router, ready to put some finish on. It doesn't need any finish, it doesn't need any protection. The only thing it does by applying either oil or, in my case, shellac, is it just keeps it clean. It doesn't get grungy. So I'm putting on a couple of coats of shellac. I don't do the underside, I will do all the top and all the edges. Makes it look good, and it means there's no staining on the wood. After the first coat's dried, I usually sand it with a light sanding. I use a fine grit, 250 grit paper, but I rub the surfaces together to wear them down a little bit more, so they're probably closer to about 400. That means it doesn't take so much of the finish off, and it gives it a nice smooth finish. The thing about putting shellac on, especially on these small projects, but on any project, is not to fuss with it. You put the first coat on, you sand it. When you go with the second coat, you just place the finish on, pull it out by brushing, and then leave it. Don't rub it too much because it will be dissolving the previous coat and it will go gummy. The purple liquid you saw is just denatured alcohol or methylated spirits, and that's just to dissolve the shellac, clean up my brush. A 4/0 steel wool and a little bit of wax polish on it will make the whole plane feel very, very comfortable. Almost looks like a piece of furniture to me. So I align the grain to whatever orientation I like. You can align yours however you like yours. That's wax polish going on. This is the sequence for the retainer bar, so the narrow aspect of it goes to the bottom, and then you apply all the different washers. There it is, what a beauty.